I'm so grateful Ellie adjusted the microphone because I see Shelley do it every other Sunday, and I'm like, how does that work? Thanks, Ellie. I feel like as a new member, getting asked to speak in a 15th year celebration feels significant and is something that I appreciate about Peace as a community. I appreciate being somewhere where at any point that you arrive, you're an important part of the community, an important part of the story. So also appreciate getting to talk. I don't have 15 years here, but I do have more than 15 years of experience seeing churches be run. My parents were both ministers growing up, and I can tell you from a family member's perspective the amount of blood, sweat, and tears that goes into making a church function as a community. I also have been in Kansas City about 15 years, and most of those years have been as a founder, as a founding teacher and as a founding principal, and know that not just running a church, but the idea of founding a church is an additional level of mental, emotional, spiritual energy that goes into it. And I also know that that's more than a one-person job. It's more than a two-pastor job. It's more than a two-pastor and a few music staff members' job. And so I do want to say thank you to the folks who are in the room for the sweat, the dollars, the energy that you've put into making Peace a place that now feels like home for me. When Holly asked me to speak today, I wish I had felt honored. I felt like pressure, like, oh, I need to answer this question. In a good way, good pressure, right? We grow from pressure. And also, while I'm not a teacher anymore, I am a teacher at heart. And so I started being like, well, what would I tell a student who's asked to speak or to write a speech or write an essay? Step one, any teacher in the room knows you unpack the prompt. So I must have asked Holly like 3 times, what did you want me to talk about again? Because I was really like struggling with this prompt. And the question was, what's it mean to be at a new church? My wife, my therapist will all tell you I'm an overthinker. So this simple question felt complicated to me. I was like, well, does that mean because Peace is new and like there are a lot of churches that are 120 years old and Peace is 15 years old and that's new? Is that what I'm talking about? Is it, I grew up at my parents' church, that my dad's church specifically, that was my old church. This is a new church for me. What's it meant to find church here? Or I got really deep into thinking. I was like, this is Eastertide in the season of the church, and the church was new. Should I talk about what it was like to be new church and how that's like here? I've been reading Acts recently, so that's like very much front of mind, and the idea in Acts of the Spirit kind of moving and creating new church all these places and making new church even out of existing communities was sitting with me. So I was like, okay, there are really 4 prompts to answer. Let me stop overthinking. I think as each of those things sat with me, I really thought about the season where Shelley and I found church here at Peace, and what our journey over the last few years has meant. So we arrived in 2022. It was a season where we really needed church. We were going through, I would say, the first big rough patch in our marriage, and also feeling like some alienation at work. Some alienation from communities that have felt like these are our friends in Kansas City. And Shelley is almost always right. She looked at me one day and she was like, I think we need to find a new church. I knew she was right, so I wasn't resistant. I immediately built a spreadsheet, as a good millennial would do. This is like preceding my days in data work. But I built a spreadsheet. I started Googling. I started recording information about where is this church and how far is it from where we live and what do they say politically online? Do they say anything politically online? I don't know that like Google Sheets and Google searches are where I would have expected the Holy Spirit to show up. And also, we were moved through those things. So we visited in 2022. I was not optimistic about the idea of finding new church. That was partially East Coast bias, if I'm honest with you. I love the church I grew up in. It was welcoming and affirming from the early 90s. It was racially diverse. It was vibrant. It was progressive. And Shelley and I in the 2010s had visited some churches. We found some places that were multi-generational and vibrant, but they really let us down when it came down to issues of equity and justice. I had kind of heard secondhand. There are other churches in Kansas City that are more progressive, but they didn't secondhand sound politically, they didn't sound vibrant in terms of the energy that we were looking for in community. And I think at a certain point I had given up as a upstate New Yorker finding a place that felt like all of the things that I was looking for here in Kansas City. I also, in that, was making assumptions about myself. I am too picky about church to find church here in Kansas City. But I think as we learn when there's a need, that can overcome things like those assumptions. And I think a few years ago we had the need and we needed to find community. So we visited a few different churches. I also remember our first Sunday here, and I didn't go cry after the sermon, although it was a beautiful sermon, I think. What I do remember, though, was I remember there being announcements, and in the announcements hearing that there was a book group that was reading one of Jason Kander's books and meeting and talking about it. I remember hearing that there was political action that was happening in the church. I remember hearing about some group called Bible and Brew, and I was like, I like Bible, I like brew, like that might be a thing. And I think I also remember then having my interest piqued enough that we would come back a few times, and that as we came back, more folks reached out to us, more folks connected with us. It felt like, oh, this is a new church that knows that it needs new energy and new people as well, and we're wanted here. And that was really powerful for us, especially in a season of feeling, we are like navigating this tension and feeling unwanted in these places that had previously been nourishing to us. It felt really meaningful to feel welcomed. The more that I learned about peace, the more that I felt like, oh, there are things that kind of mirror this church with the lives that we're living right now. It felt like peace had been through and was embracing going through periods of navigating conflict and turmoil, just like we were navigating conflict and turmoil. It felt like this is a church where we make mistakes and we talk about those things and we share about those things. And as we were growing comfortable learning to talk about those things in our lives, it was really important to see that mirrored. It felt like, oh, this is a church that's like navigating the political cultural moment that is 2022 to 2026. I don't even know what that moment is. And we were also trying to figure out how to navigate that in our lives. And I think most importantly, we found a church. We wanted to find a church, and it felt like Peace was a church that wanted to be found by us. And I think that that was really meaningful for us. I think this, like, what's a new church comes back to me. And I don't know that I believe that old church is church. Not that, like, you can't be a 120-year-old building and be church. Not that you can't be a congregation that's existed for a while and being church. But I think even in places that I found home, church remakes itself and is recreating itself constantly to become new church and new community. At the church I grew up in, that was learning to reckon with being more inclusive and equitable. It was hiring a black minister for the first time and being an inner city church that attracted folks who didn't look like the original founding membership and figuring out what does it look like to be inclusive. At a certain point, there were like hundreds of refugees that came from Burma and joined the church and were welcomed in. And I think what I learned church was to be embracing new people, bringing those people in, creating new. And I think I've seen Peace do that even in the last 3 or 4 years. When I look around at the church on Sundays, I see a lot more young children. I hear them right now. I think I see more families. I see different staff members who have stepped up and joined different things. I think we've had new moments to meet. I've been really grateful to be a part of trying to figure out in the church what does it mean to meet some of the political moment and organize. And I think Peace has also started to see us through transitions in the last couple of years. A professional leap for me, getting into figuring out what it means to organize outside of work in our communities. And I think just finding new community in Kansas City in general. I think continuing to be new church, to me, feels like it will continue to take hard work and commitment. We weren't, at Barstow or the Buddhist temple with you all to see that commitment. But I do feel grateful for the foundation that you all creating new church over and over again has laid for what we are now. And I think Shelley and I joining a couple of months ago was kind of the final step in this new church is our church. That we're not so much thinking about how does this mirror, like mirroring is two separate stories, but how do we make this church part of our story and how do we become part of this church's story? So I think I also am kind of ending feeling grateful. I'm grateful for the work that you all did in 2012. I'm grateful for the welcome we received in 2022. I'm grateful that we get to be new members in 2026. And And I think I'm excited to keep finding new church with you all, whether that's with new years, whether that's with, God willing, new presidencies, governorships, and representation in Jefferson City, whether that is as we have new people join us and create new church with us. So thank you all, and here's to new church as we move forward.